When I was younger, I grew up in this old 1800s house in southern England, and even to this day, I still have occurrences in that house. I was around 4 or 5 when I started to realize just how messed up things were getting. Whenever I went to sleep, I would have these recurring dreams where I would start off in my room, which was at the top of the house, and make my way downstairs. You know that feeling you get, as if someone is watching you, and you have that urge to turn around and check? I remember always having that feeling, making my way downstairs, and whenever I did check, I would see these different ghosts. The first, the ghost of this small Victorian child, wearing attire from a century I had never seen outside of this dream being so young, stood just outside my room in the corner. Down the first flight of stairs, and I would see this woman who stood with her back to me, dressed entirely in an old, black, tattered dress. As I approached her, she slowly turned around, and I saw she had really wide eyes, and her smile would stretch across her entire face. The first two didn't hurt me, just screamed at me, or would run into me, and then the dream would continue. The final ghost was at the bottom of the second flight of stairs, by the door. In my dream, I would sit at the bottom and wait until a figure appeared behind the glass and would begin bashing the door until it swung open or was forced off its hinges, depending on the night. This ghost was of a man incredibly broad and very tall. He was balding, around 50, with rough hands. I don't know why, but he was the most vivid in my dream. He would pull out a knife and he would slowly push it into my belly. I could feel it cutting into my gut. I would try screaming, but I would be silent. I tried punching and kicking, but I had no force behind my movements. And then, as I could feel things get darker, the entire environment in my dream would spin into a whirlpool, and I drowned to death. And that's when I would wake up. I would have this recurring nightmare every day for about 5 months straight, hence why they became so easy to remember. As the years went on, my 2 older brothers would talk to me about various experiences when they happened. For one brother, whose room was right next to mine on the top floor, he had a friend around, and when going upstairs and looking through the crack in the door to see his friend sitting on his bed, he also saw the ghost of this Victorian girl standing behind his friend. When going into the room and confronting his friend, neither found any trace of another person in the room. My other brother, after having a shower and peering through the glass pane on the bathroom door, saw his friend standing by the stairs with a figure of a tall, broad man standing next to him. Upon asking, his friend revealed that they were alone in the house, as my brother had left 10 to 15 minutes prior. My friend has heard cries and laughter of a woman around the house on the 2nd floor, inside one of the master bedrooms. I have come to realize that the ghosts I saw in my dreams were being seen by family and friends in the house in waking life. And I've also come to realize that me being so young, I might have thought I was sleeping, but maybe I was actually sleepwalking around the house at night and seeing these spirits that inhabit my home before blacking out and finding my way back to bed. I have been caught sleepwalking before, and sleep paralysis was regular for me as a child up until about 10 years old. Creepy stuff. My whole family are very sensitive to witnessing paranormal activity, and I've had a bunch of other experiences in my house. For me, it happens all the time. I work as a curator for an art gallery in Japan. In Japan, even in the most modernized city of Tokyo, everyone believes in ghosts. Even the most secular Japanese would be afraid of staying alone in places like the office due to the existence of a ghost that peers at you from the dark spaces in between. These eyes can be anywhere. The narrow space in between bookshelves, a slightly open drawer, etc. My story started late one evening, when I had to stay past closing time to complete an assignment given to me by my repulsive boss. He was a fat, balding, sexist man who had an unrealistic idea of his own importance, and he expected any assignments given to be completed on the day itself. As I said, I was alone in the gallery on that day when I heard a soft tapping sound, which seemed to come from behind a painting. I dismissed it as some internal dripping of water within the wall and went on completing my assignment. The dripping got louder and louder, and I became increasingly frightened. Still, the assignment had to be completed. To quiet the disquiet in my heart, I decided to play some music in the office. However, after about 30 minutes, I heard a strange voice coming from the direction of the painting. It was voiced in a monotonous pitch, and it sounded human, but with an unhuman quality. Mind you, the entire gallery space was dark with the lights switched off. Only the office had lights on. I wanted to leave at this point, and I couldn't shake off cold fear I felt at the back of my neck. However, to leave the office, I had to switch on the security system, which was located at the back of the gallery space, near the painting, which incidentally was a portrait piece. The painting featured a woman in a dress from the Victorian period, clutching a fan to her chest. I was at a loss for what to do. So nothing happened at this point to end my dilemma. As I stood looking towards the dark gallery space, almost drowning in stupefying fear, I thought I saw something glisten from the painting. It seemed white in color to me. I decided to pluck up my courage to investigate. I didn't take more than 20 steps until I realized what it was. The glistening white came from the rolling eyeballs of the lady in the portrait, who was trying to roll her eyes at me to direct her gaze on me. Her eyeballs were the only part of her body that could move. The rest of her, including her head, was facing the opposite direction from me. For some reason I knew that if her gaze fell on me, that would be the end of my existence on Earth. Job or not, this was too much for me, and I turned and ran out of the gallery. The next morning, bright and early, I went back to the gallery. Although I had run out without locking the doors, every painting was still in place, even the painting of the portrait. The only difference is the painting is now a blank. The Victorian lady had managed to extricate herself from the painting and fled in the night. I've been hunting for 5 years. Before that, I was in the Army for 10, and before that, I was a scout on the biathlon team and into recreational hiking and camping. Suffice it to say, I've spent a lot of years off the beaten track. I'm in the low-risk category to get into trouble in the woods. I'm armed. I have bear spray. I have with me a radio or a mobile phone depending on proximity to cell towers, and possibly a GPS. And I always have a compass and maps. I know the woods and how to survive, and I don't spook easily. I typically hunt solo in massive tracts of crown land in northern Ontario. I've seen or heard wolves, coyotes, and mountain lions. I even saw a wolverine once. Black bears do not concern me. Moose are dangerous, but I keep my distance or shoot them as I'm typically hunting them. Unless I'm badly hurt, I really have nothing to fear from animals in the woods. Humans are the apex predator, after all, and it's good to be king. That being said, I am wary, but not afraid of other men I'll run into in the woods, and most of the time, they're friendly and go on their way. Some are aggressive or drunk, but offering them a cigarette and kind words tends to calm those guys down. I'll share a couple of unexplained occurrences, however, that still chill me to this day. The first one happened a few years ago while I was solo hunting deer in the fall. I was camped for the night in a vast, frozen, swampy area. The only access was a decades-old logging track off the main road, and I was several kilometers from that track. There were no other hiking trails or other access, so I was sure I was quite alone. As a matter of fact, I hadn't seen or heard anyone else for 2 days. I had a good dinner and went to sleep as it started to lightly snow. I woke up with a start at 4:32 in the morning. I know the exact time because I looked at my watch. I could clearly hear sleigh bells, the kind Santa's reindeer wear. There were no other sounds except the wind and snow, no pre-dawn birds, footfalls, or snapping twigs. Just eerie bells intermittently jingling. At first, I thought I was still dreaming, but I forced myself to check all my gear to prove to myself that I was awake. Then I sat there, shivering in my tent, praying that whatever was making that sound would go away. Going outside there to look wouldn't have helped. It was pitch black anyway. My mind was running through all the logical possibilities. I'm dreaming. It's a dog or a cat wearing a bell on its collar. It's an escaped reindeer. It's actually Santa. It's hikers wearing bells. My mind started to get away from me. I finally couldn't take it any longer, and I shouted out, "Whoever's ringing those damn bells can go away now." The bells abruptly stopped. I sat there, listening for another couple of hours, my mind racing, with chills marching down my spine. Thankfully, the bells never came back. When dawn broke, I scouted the area with my self-loading rifle, looking for a sign of who or what had passed in the dark. There was a fresh layer of snow on everything, so finding tracks would be easy. Not one track. Nothing, for hundreds of paces in every direction. I had been thorough. On discovering that, I broke camp and got the fuck out of there. Hunting was over for the season in that spot. Sure, I tried to laugh it off. "Scared out of the woods by Santa, you're such a little bitch," I said to myself. But I was truly spooked. A few years later, I was out for grouse, beating the bushes for those elusive gray birds. The area I was in was remote, but was cut in two by some high-voltage power lines and towers. I was walking the edge of one of those cuts, enjoying the sunny day and whistling. I really enjoy upland bird hunting. It's a relaxing way to spend the day and very casual as far as hunting goes. I wasn't surprised to hear ATV engines after some time, and I walked over to the one that stopped near me. "Seen any birds?" he practically yelled at me, still deafened by his engine. I offered my hand, and he shook it. "Hanson," he introduced, looking me up and down. "That's my surname." I chuckled and told him mine. He was an old dude. I'm middle-aged and getting on there, but he was old. We had a smoke and shot the breeze. His great-grandfather had established the first hunting camp in the area back in 1839, and they still ran it every fall. He knew those woods well. We compared shotguns, talked about the beautiful weather, and the usual bullshittery. When I found out they had no younger guys in their party, I was actually hoping for an invite to his camp for deer season and was angling the conversation that way. Get some tips and stories, new blood carrying on the tradition and all. "How long you been coming here?" He had cut me off, suddenly and sternly. A couple of years," I said, "mostly for birds." "Then you've heard her." Her? What the fuck was he talking about? The witch. I couldn't help but smile at that, although his face was deadpan and serious. Right away I knew he was trying to spook me off his hunting spot with ghost stories, and just before deer season to boot. Fuck this old codger, what a dick. This is public property, after all. "So you're telling me a witch has haunted these woods since the 19th century, I was humoring him. "Yeah, something like that." He spit and put his smoke out with his boot. "Used to live in that abandoned farmhouse off the access road." I had seen the place before, a creepy pioneer log cabin, disused for generations. When my young son had been with me one day, he had refused to go near the place. He had complained that it made him feel all wrong. "You know she's nearby when you hear the sleigh bells." My blood froze. "Well, nice meeting you, Hanson. Thanks for the chat," I stammered, and abruptly turned and walked back to the cut, and I could feel him staring at me the whole way. He eventually started his engine and rode away. What an asshole. How did he know that? Was this some sort of backwoods folklore about witches and sleigh bells? I walked straight to my truck and drove out of there. Fast. When I got home, I Googled it for hours and nothing came up. I eventually wrote it off as a coincidence and tried to push it out of my mind. Sometime later, I was packing for my deer hunt. I had buddies coming in from distant cities. It was going to be glorious, and I wouldn't have to go out alone. But then they all canceled, one by one. Wife's in the hospital was one story, more like she's got your balls. Another one, I had to work, the always busy and hectic doctor. That story was more believable. Another one was suddenly working nights. No matter, I was going anyway, and would send them pictures of my magnificent deer and regale them with stories for years whilst reminding them of their lame cancellations. I went back to the power lines area, as I had seen and followed many game trails during my bird hunting there. Besides, I sure as shit was not going back to the frozen swamp of witch bells, as I now called it. I knew Hansen and his mates would be around, but I knew where their camp was, and I was heading to the southeast, near Little Birch Lake, deep in the woods. I had butterflies in my stomach. Pretty common for me at the beginning of a season, all giddy with excitement. But they were more intense somehow. I tried not to think of Hansen's story. Then again, if Hansen had obviously survived years of hunting in the same woods, so would I. Fuck it, I went. Furthermore, the weather was nice, intermittent sun, and hovering around freezing. Overall, a nice day to go out into the woods. I wore a smile when I headed out. Now, if you've never been big game hunting in closed country, in the bush, as it's known, it's rather slow going. You're wearing light boots and sneaking around, trying to make as little noise as possible. My buddy and I, we call it Last of the Mohican style. Every step is measured and placed carefully, toe to heel, to reduce noise. Your head's up, scanning around, ears straining for any hint of game sounds. You stop, just to listen, frequently. The English call it still hunting, or stalking. I much prefer it to sitting in a stand freezing your ass off all day. I proceeded southwest from the cut at my snail's pace. It probably took me all day to cover the 5 or 6 kilometers to the lake, but it was exhilarating. Gliding silently through the bush like an expert tracker, taking in all the sights, sounds, and smells. The weather had soured over the course of the afternoon, clouding over and getting breezy. It was getting darker and colder. The late fall forest had come alive, swaying and creaking in the breeze. The change had been so gradual I hadn't even noticed it. The witch. It came unbidden into my mind. "Fuck you, Hansen," I muttered aloud. "You're not going to spook me." I realized at that point that I hadn't had a smoke all day. I lit one and sat down, trying to calm my nerves. It was helping. When I was putting it out, I saw something. A hint of black, an unusual color in the woods. Bear? I shouldered my rifle and clicked the safety off, peering through the illuminated reflex sight. "Just me, Dare. Go away now. You don't want to tangle with me." I started talking out loud in the manner I had learned to scare the elusive beasts away. But I wasn't taking any chances. I had a full magazine of .308 Accubons at my command, should it come to that. And I was an expert shot, having been shooting since I was a kid. I was standing now, in a firing stance, and stepping towards the black smear while talking. It didn't move as it came into full view. I lowered my rifle. Animal kill. I let out a sigh of relief and walked over to it, chuckling out loud at my nervousness. It was the scene of a bird's demise, a turkey, by the looks of it, and fresh. There had been a struggle, and there were feathers everywhere. A fox or a coyote had a good meal, that was for certain. One of its claws was left from the drumstick up. It had been gnawed off. I saw the other leg propped up against the tree nearby, and under it was the tail fan. I went to check it out. It looks unnatural. The fan had been cleanly severed from the bird, and the leg had been cut off at the joint with a knife. The evil-looking claw had clearly been propped up against the tree by someone. I tossed the claw from between my fingertips, anxious to be rid of it. My mind began racing again. I was in the middle of nowhere with no trails. "There are no witches," I mumbled as I stood up. I took a deep breath and pressed on, uncertainly. It was nearly dusk now, and the brackish small lake had come into view. The wind was gusting now, carrying with it the scent of putrid, semi-frozen water. I was still feeling rattled, but I resolved to find a spot, set up camp, build a big-ass fire, and drink the flask of brandy I had in my breast pocket. Eat some food, and fall asleep. That would make everything better. I was nearing the edge of a clearing by the lake, feeling better about my situation, when I heard a loud splash, sounding like something big had jumped into the water, closely followed by another one. Then nothing but the wind, as ripples spread across the water. I moved closer to see where they or it had gone, and then I heard them again. Sleigh bells. I could feel the tendrils of panic tightening around my chest and temples like the first time I had been in combat. My vision narrowed. "Fuck you, Hanson. I've had enough of your shit. You're not gonna scare me out of here. Hello? Come out here right fucking now," I shouted into the gloom. Yet I could see nothing for the trees. More bells. I'm not ashamed to admit that I fled. I shouted a curse and started back the way I came in. I grabbed at my compass, hanging from a lanyard at my shoulder. My hands were shaking as I tried to make out the luminous dial. The needle spun around at random, totally useless. I held my wrist with my other hand and tried to steady it. The bells continued. While breaking into a jog, I fumbled for my GPS and hit the backtrack button. It lit up trail to my truck. I could swear the bells were following me. "I'm warning you, quit following me." I had my rifle up now, aimed back towards the lake, but the bells didn't stop. I couldn't see anything by this point. It was pitch black. I realized the futility of threatening with a rifle in the dark, turned around, and continued stomping through the woods far too quickly, occasionally tripping and cursing. The bells started to subside, and then they stopped. "Please make it to the truck. Please make it to the truck," I was chanting as I crashed through the tangle of woods. I finally regained enough composure to put a headlamp on so I wouldn't fall down as much. It took me seemingly forever to fight myself through the undergrowth, skinning my shins and knees and hands. I was chanting the whole way. When I finally got to the truck, I was certain nothing had followed me as I fumbled with the keys. More bells. I don't remember the drive home. Weeks passed, I calmed down. I was thankful that I wasn't harmed or hadn't gone missing, somewhat selfishly, but also for my family's sake. I had resolved to never go hunting alone again. I was watching TV with my wife one night. She was flipping channels. We'd be staying at home, making a big picnic in bed. Click. Missing hunters have been found after the search. Click. "Wait," I yelled her. "Go back, go back." "What's your problem? Jesus." Click. A provincial police officer's talking head appeared on the screen. Edward Hanson, 86, of Lanark County, and his brother Robert, 83, also from Lanark, have been found deceased weeks after the search for them had been called off. The coroner has ruled this to be an accidental drowning. No, 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 no. I was standing now, hands on my head. "What's wrong, babe? Babe?" After being found on the shore of a remote little birch lake. No foul play is suspected, and we are not treating this as an active homicide investigation at this time. Anyone with information about their disappearance is urged to come forward. This experience happened at least 7 years ago. A brief prequel, but our house has already been confirmed to be haunted, with all the sightings having the same descriptions despite the large variety in time and relation to the family. All of these reports describe an elderly woman presumed to have been the former owner of the house, dying overseas before it was taken over by her descendant. Paranormal activities have been very normal to me since I was a child, with nearly everyone in my family being spiritually aware and with our mutual love for the unseen world. One night, we had more guests over than our spare bedroom could fit, so I gave up my room and slept in my old bed in my parents' room. It was not your traditional master bedroom setup. My parents' bed was on the northeastern corner facing down northwest, and right before the southeastern cabinets was a large vanity mirror with raised wooden platforms for holding bottles of lotion, cologne, cotton, and jewelry. My bed was on the southwestern corner, facing up to the northwest, so my head was toward the northern part of the room with the vanity mirror clearly in sight. I woke up from my sleep somewhere between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, and I saw a few dim embers on the topmost platform of the vanity mirror. I was astounded at first, wondering if it was a reflection of any red light source within the room. A few minutes later, I could make out the shape of two creatures with a specifically shaped ember forming a head, a torso, and its extremities. They soon started moving on the platform as if searching for something. At this point, I was still skeptical about the situation, opting to think that a red light source from the oscillating fan gave birth to these imaginary creatures. But no. A few seconds later, I could clearly see them hold on to the platform's edge and drop down to the lower platform. They moved in a rather comical way, as if arguing about something and constantly hitting each other. The two continued looking around and dropping lower and lower. By the time they reached the bottom platform, their lights had grown considerably dimmer, and after a while, they departed to a corner blocked by my mom's watch case. The next morning, I immediately ran to the vanity mirror to look for evidence, even just a tiny burn mark, to prove what I saw. Yet still, it's as if nothing has ever happened. I don't know what I saw. Do you? It was about 10 years ago. I was a 21-year-old naive goth girl who always had a fascination with the occult ever since I was very young. I lived in my first apartment in Connecticut with my now ex-boyfriend. My ex and I shared a love of great music, alcohol, and visiting beautiful cemeteries at 3 a.m. to be mischievous, adventurous, and naughty at times. One night in particular, we had made our own Ouija board using a glass as the planchette. Needless to say, it was uneventful, so we put it back in the car and drove home. When we arrived, it had just turned 4 in the morning, and our neighborhood was absolutely silent. Pitch black. Everyone had their lights out. We walked into the back door, which had a window on it, and closed it, and began to walk up the stairs. Before we got to the top, we froze in horror at what we heard. It sounded like a hand, slamming on the door window and dragging its hand down the glass slowly. It repeated this 3 more times. Our hearts jumped to our throats, and we stood in silence, in complete fear for what seemed like forever. We whispered back and forth, shaking and completely confused. I screamed, "Go away! You're not allowed in!" And for the rest of the night, we heard nothing. I still don't know what happened that night, but that was the night I truly believed in spirits.